Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Andrew here at BTO Range in Conroe, Texas. Today on the table we have one of, in my opinion, one of the better American pattern side-by-sides from the 70s and 80s. This is the Browning BSS, and that's actually B-S/S for Browning side-by-side. Once again, Browning not very inventive with their model names, but BSS is what it's typically called. And these shotguns were introduced in 1971, and they ran all the way to 1987. So they had a 16-year run in the Browning line. So a little bit of history on this gun. It started out, it was never a Belgian, never a European gun. It was, started out at the Miroku factory in Japan, produced for Browning. And Miroku had been producing a side-by-side shotgun, same basic gun, different trim, different furniture. And it had been imported and marketed worldwide under the Charles Daly name. And there was some importation under the Western field name by Montgomery Ward as well. So there are occasions when you'll run into these guns under a different brand name other than Browning, same basic gun made by Miroku. So it was introduced in 12 gauge in 1971, and then a year later 72 in 20 gauge. And this is a 20 gauge gun from 1972. So it is a first year gun in the 20 gauge. So these were made for the U.S. market. It has it's considered an American style side-by-side with the large beaver tail forend, kind of heavy through the stock. And the American style or American pattern side-by-sides are typically heavier than, say, English side-by-side shotguns or the typical splinter forend, more sleek. Think Parker, think L.C. Smith, even though they're American guns, they're very European in styling. And this is more of the chunkier hand-filling style that American hunters and American shooters wanted, especially back in the 70s and 80s. So that's how this gun was designed, that's how this gun was marketed. So in 71 and in 72, these guns were introduced in 12 and 20 gauge. They were not produced in any other gauges. So you won't find them in 16 or 28 or 410. So 12 and 20 gauge were your options on this gun. Typical box lock configuration gun. It was introduced with this single non-selective trigger. So the trigger is going to fire the more open barrel first, typically the right barrel. We'll open it up and make sure that I'm right there. But it fires the open barrel first, and then it mechanically goes to the next barrel. Doesn't require recoil. There's no inertia block inside that. So later on, they would change that to a selective trigger where you could select which barrel fired first. That happened in about 1977. So 1972 20 gauge was introduced, and then a lot of changes happened in 1977 for this gun. In 1977, they moved assembly of this gun to Korea. Still Japanese parts, still Miroku parts, but they were being assembled in Korea starting in 1977 and throughout the rest of the run. And you'll see that inscribed on the barrel. It will say assembled in Korea from Japanese parts, or some wording along that line in the typical Browning font on the barrel. So they didn't hide the fact they were being assembled in Korea. And we'll talk about what effect that has on price here in just a little bit. So in 77, they also introduced a Sporter, which was the same basic gun, slightly slimmer forend, but it had a straight stock. Didn't have the pistol grip stock, so it had a straight stock here, but the tang was much longer. So a little precaution there. You could take this gun, replace the trigger guard and the stock with a Sporter stock, and effectively create a Sporter. Sporters tend to go for a little bit more money. Original Sporters tend to go for a little bit more money. So pay attention to the forend configuration. The forend on the Sporter is smaller than the forend on this field gun in 20 gauge. So if you're looking at a Sporter, just be aware of what that forend should look like along with the stock. So also in 77, the grade 2 gun was introduced. The grade 2 gun, nicer wood, grade receiver, and a more or larger engraving pattern on that gun. So that all happened in 77 with the move to Korea. At the same time, they introduced that selective trigger, and that trigger was gold, not silver. So all of the non-selective triggers on this gun were silver in color. The selective single triggers were gold in color. So that's an easy way, just without really even manipulating the gun. You can pretty much tell what trigger this has in it just by simply the color of the actual trigger itself. Now, some of the earlier guns before the Browning importation, the ones that were imported under the Ward's name or under the Charles Daly name, some of those actually had double triggers as well. So you may see this same basic gun with double triggers, but not in the Browning. The Browning is always going to have the single trigger, whether it's selective or non-selective. The gun came standard with selective ejectors. In other words, it will eject the fired case. It will extract an unfired round. So that was standard on the gun from minute one all the way through the production run. Barrel lengths available on this gun were the typical run of commercial barrel lengths. In 12 gauge, you had 26, 28, or 30-inch guns. Now, these are fixed choke guns. There are no interchangeable choke tubes. So you had your choice of improved cylinder and modified or full, and full and full. In the 20 gauge, you had 26 and 28-inch barrels. This is a 26-inch barrel. Improved cylinder or modified, which is what this choke pattern is, and then modified and full. So what do you look at if, and these are wonderful guns. These are really sturdy guns. They're built to last. I can't recall ever having to work on one other than really to clean it. So they tend to be pretty robust gun, last for a good long time. Now, that said, we've seen plenty, and there's a lot of muzzle wall here on these guns, so they do lend themselves to installation of choke tubes, should that be something that someone wants to do to the gun. But really, a 20 gauge improved cylinder modified gun, it's hard for me to come up. I'm not a big goose hunter, or when I hunt ducks, it's over decoys typically, so I don't know what I would need a 12 gauge full and full for, something with that kind of choke pattern to it. So this particular gauge and choke combination would handle virtually all the shotgun hunting sports or shotgun shooting that I would do personally. I just wish it was a 16 gauge, my favorite gauge, but that's another story. But this is a 20, which is just fine. So let's take a look and see what we have here. We have a very nice black walnut stock with cut checkering, right? These were cut checkered stocks. This pad is not original on this gun. It would have come with a black Browning logoed butt plate. So that's been added, but it's been added fairly well, so it's not a huge detraction to it. This was hand engraved. These were all hand engraved guns. I'm not sure whether they were hand engraved start to finish, or whether they were machine cut and then chased by hand. That would be what I would suspect probably happened, as they were rolled and then chased by hand. Still a laborious process. Nicely blued. The barrels are not chrome lined on BSSs. They are not chrome lined at all. So you have to. There's a little bit of maintenance and a little bit of care that you would take with this gun, just to keep it running. So let's take it apart. Let's just pop it apart real quick and look at some of the markings on it. So we can see that we're clear. Typical 4N latch here. We just remove the 4N lever. You'll find the serial number of the shotguns underneath the top lever. And this is a 72 gun. Before 1975, well, from 68 to 75, Browning had the year of manufacture as part of the serial number. And there's a 72 suffix on the serial number here, so 72 gun. In 1975, they changed the serialization pattern of all Browning models and incorporated a 3-digit product code and a 2-letter date code corresponding to the last 2 digits of the year of manufacture. And those charts are available at browning.com and at various other places on the internet, so you can check those out. We really don't see much on the water table at all. You see that the firing pins on these guns are bushed. So with the correct spanner wrench, you can actually pull the bushings and bring the firing pins out for maintenance if you need to from the front without having to get into the back of the gun. So we'll set that off to the side. And looking at the water table here, we see that it is serialized to the shotgun, so that's something you definitely want to check if you're looking at a Browning BSS, is to make sure that the barrel set is the correct one for the receiver of the shotgun. And then you see some various proof marks, gauge marking. They even mark the length of the barrel. They mark the lengths of the barrel here. So if you have a non-standard barrel length, opening it up to the water table will tell you what the barrels used to be. So, but there weren't any non-standard barrel lengths really, 26, 28, and 30. So if you have something that's 24 inches long or 22 inches long, that's been shortened. So, but the original barrel length would be listed there. And then you have the typical Browning choke designator, the asterisk and the dashes. So you have the left-hand barrel, that'd be this barrel here, with 2 stars, 2 asterisks, that indicates a modified choke. And then the right barrel is 2 asterisks and a minus, which indicates improved cylinder. So the Browning choke designators go from 1 asterisk, full choke, all the way down to 3 asterisks, which is cylinder bore. And then there's some stuff in between, like you see this improved cylinder. And then there's an improved modified and a skeet, which is skeet's 2 asterisks and a $sign. But again, you can find those charts available at Browning.com if you need to look at what your fixed choke is. Guns with invectors will just say invector or invector plus, and then the choke tubes themselves are notched, and the number of notches correspond to the choke pattern. So what are we looking for when we evaluate one of these shotguns? Obviously the exterior condition, if there's any rust or corrosion on the gun or on the bluing, just as with anything else. And then we're going to make sure that we don't have any pitting in the bores. I like to run my, you can look and see if there's any dents or dings in the guns, but sometimes I can feel them before I see them, mainly because my eyes have gotten bad over the years. But any dents, we can typically raise a dent in a shotgun barrel. We can't fix bulges, so a bulged barrel is typically a kind of a fatal incident for a set of shotgun barrels. But these ribs are nicely matted, so there's nothing wrong with this barrel set, right? When we look at the same thing we're looking at here, we're looking for any exterior rust. And remember that this is a typical handling point of the shotgun, especially people that wear rings on this hand will sometimes see a lot of finish damage to the bottom tang of the trigger guard here. And we don't have any on this gun. And likewise, the carry point of the shotgun, we're always looking for rust and corrosion to crop up, and it's not here. So this gun is 72. The first year of 12 gauge guns were 71. And we've talked about it in the past, and that's on the back side, the very back end of Browning's little fiasco with saltwood. And I have never known a BSS to have a saltwood problem. And if they were to have one, it would be in that 71 gun range. That first year 12 gauge, this is 72, so it'd be very unusual to have saltwood in this gun. So that said, I did check it when we bought it, and we're going to carefully look at this juncture of wood to metal here, and we don't see any indication of any kind of corrosion blooming from that. So we would check the triggers, make sure the trigger is advancing from one side to the next, make sure the gun functions well. So these are really robust shotguns. It's unusual to find one that has a significant issue. Parts on this gun are still somewhat available. I believe that all of the existing parts when the gun was discontinued, I believe all the existing parts were purchased by a company called Western Gun Parts in Canada, which is the Canadian version, if you will, of Numeric Gun Parts. But I don't know what all they have left, and then there's always a problematic thing about trying to get them sent to the United States. I logged onto their website this morning and just mocked up an order, and I couldn't get it to accept a United States address or our address here in Texas. So that may be a bit of an issue. Obviously, we could call them and try to figure that out. So the forend also, I neglected to mention, the forend iron as well is serialized to the receiver, so all that should match. And we're going to look at if these screws are bunged up, and they're not, how well this is fitting back into the wood. So we have a fairly decent condition gun. There's a couple of small little whiskey dents here and there on this gun from being handled. It's a 52-year-old shotgun, but it's in really nice shape for the age that it's in. So that brings us to our favorite question: how much is the gun worth? And it's kind of hard to answer those kind of questions, because anything, I don't care whether it's a gun or a car or a used lawnmower or whatever it is, a gun is exactly worth as much as you get for it. And if both parties are happy, it's a good deal. So that said, it's still a valid question. It's probably the number one question we get. So the standard gun, the standard field gun, all Japanese. In 20 gauge, will bring a little bit more than 12 gauge, and you'll see these guns in 20 gauge moving in that $1,200 to $1,400 range. If it was in the original box, new or close to new, it could even creep up pretty close to that $2,000 range if you found the right buyer at the right time. 12 gauge, a couple $100 less than that throughout that condition range. The sporters, the straight stock guns, tend to bring a little bit more. And I've seen some recent sales of 20 gauge sporters, again cased in a Browning case, get up close to that $2,000 range with the straight stock gun. So that's why it's important to do a bit of due diligence to see if that gun is a true sporter. If this gun had a straight stock, there's no way it could be a sporter. It was made in '72. Sporters weren't introduced then. So a little bit of detective work and knowing a little bit about the model can help you discern whether the gun was actually a sporter or not. I don't know if the gun is in the year range where the sporters were made, post '77, should have the Korea marking on the barrel. I don't know if you could call Browning or not. And find out how the gun was configured. I don't know if the records exist to that detail any longer. It wouldn't surprise me if they didn't. All sporters should have a gold trigger, for instance, should have the selective trigger in it, as well as all the grade 2s should have also. Now, there was another version of this gun that was introduced in 1983. In 1983, Browning introduced a sidelock, a true sidelock version of this gun. So the metal's going to come all the way back out here. They're a sidelock gun, not a box lock. And that's only a 4-year run on that gun, on the side locks in 12 and 20 gauge. And those guns easily approach $4,000 on the used and collector's market now. So that's definitely the one, if you're going to find a BSS, that would definitely be the one money-wise to find as far as value goes. But for a shooter standpoint, you can't go wrong with the base level BSS. Now, it is heavier than an LC Smith. It's heavier than a lot of those, say, A&As or Italian guns or things of that nature. They're heavier. The BSS is heavier, but not that much. I mean, not terribly. This is a little under 7 pounds assembled in 20 gauge. I think it's like 6 pounds 10. So that's not terribly heavy, but it is heavier than the other guns. And if you're going to be walking fields all day long with a gun, it'll be a little bit more tiresome with some of those more sleeker European pattern guns, I guess, if you will. So we talk about scarcity, we talk about originality, and we talk about the condition of the gun. So the scarcity of the gun, not all that scarce. They're out there from 1971 to 1987, 16-year run, 17-year run. So there were quite a few made. I don't have the exact number of how many of these guns are made, but they are out there. Now, having said that, the sporter, the little straight stock gun, the grade 2s, and then the side locks are far more rare and command a ton more money. So the originality of a gun such as this, it's all original except for this pad. So it's kind of up to you as to how much to devalue the gun because of the pad. If the gun were in the original Browning box or a Browning fitted luggage case, to me, this would devalue the gun a little bit more than just the gun in and of itself, because I would be buying this gun as a shooter. If I bought the BSS for me, I would be intending to use it, and so the pad really wouldn't be that big of a devaluation for me at all. But if you were buying the gun as a collector piece, then yeah, unfortunately, you'd probably have to pull some money off because of the pad. The good news is the pad's well done. It's not, it's not horribly messed up here or anything. So it's well done. So it doesn't detract all that much typically. So condition of the gun, we can see that the gun has just a few user marks from going in and out of the safe or hunting or whatever. So typical on the upper side of a used gun condition. So we would be pretty comfortable in saying this is a good condition, or well, I mean NRA good is not that good, but even fine condition, NRA fine condition on this gun. So typically you can get into a BSS for around 12. In the 20 gauge guns, 12 to 15 in the 20 gauge guns, a little bit less in the 12 gauge guns for typical shooter guns. And don't be afraid to do that. If you like hunting side-by-sides, to me, that's probably my favorite type of shotgun to hunt with, is a side-by-side shotgun. To me, it's just, I don't know, blast from the past, if you will, or back where people dressed for dinner, dressed to get on airplanes, things like that. So it's just a great way to do it. Plus, you don't have to worry about the game warden asking to see the plug, that's for sure. Browning side-by-side, the Browning BSS, this is a sporter gun from 1972, first-year gun. And don't be afraid to buy them. If you find them, look for them. Look for them because sometimes they can be a bit of a sleeper on the used gun rack. So if you like what we're doing, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, take a look at some of the other videos we have out there. If you have something, a make or model that you'd like us to talk about, drop us a line, drop us a comment. If we can get a hold of one, we'll certainly try to get some information there about it. So appreciate you watching. Watch our other videos. Have a good day.